Joining us is the Environment and Water Minister, Tanya Plibersek. Tanya, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning, as always. So much confusion abounds this morning over the Treasurer's pledge to broaden super to defined benefit scheme, of which you are eligible. Are you any wiser as to how it will work?
Well, I think it's quite proper that people like me are affected in the same way as anybody else. And of course, we've got to work through the formula that you'd apply. But the reason that we've made this announcement so early, with so much time before the budget, is so that we can go through these detailed sort of calculations. I think if, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If it applies to other people, it should apply to me too. I'm perfectly happy with that.
Okay,
I think when you're talking about confusion, sorry, I was just going to say, when you're talking about confusion, I think it's really important to stick with the basics. This is a modest change that affects about 0.5% of people who've got a superannuation account. Now, the average Aussie has got about 150 grand in super. You can have 10 times that amount and it won't affect you. It's not until you hit $3 million, and you'll keep all of that $3 million. The earnings that you get will be taxed at a concessional rate still above $3 million. It'll just be a slightly more modest concessional tax rate. That means you'll still get tax advantage savings above $3 million. It just won't be quite as generous. We've got a previous government, the Liberals left us with close to $1 trillion of debt. Close to $1 trillion of debt they left Australians. And if we don't start to rein in the spending, our kids and grandkids are going to be paying back that debt with interest. So this is a very modest change that will help us make sure that our budget is sustainable in the future.
I'll get to kids in a second, because that's a fair point that you make, and more of them are going to be scooped up in this scheme. But back on defined benefits, because there is confusion about that particular part of it, has the Treasurer rushed into this announcement?
No, not at all. I mean, you need to make public what we're talking about, and then those detailed conversations with the superannuation funds and others can happen. We can get the calculations, in more detail, because we've made this public now. It won't be legislated until the May budget, and it means that we can have those conversations, on a firm basis. We know that what we're doing will affect about 0.5% of taxpayers, and we need to make sure that people in different types of superannuation schemes are affected in the same way.
Okay, yeah, but you're happy to be scooped up in that eventually once the detail is confirmed. You're happy to be caught at a higher rate.
Good for the goose, good for the gander.
Okay. Without indexation...
That's fair enough. If
without
we're expecting other... Now, just hang on a second.
Yep.
You say a higher rate. This is... you still get a generous tax concession. It's just not quite as generous as it used to be.
But 15 to 30 is higher.
Every dollar of that generous tax... but just a sec. Every dollar of that generous tax concession is being paid for today by borrowed money that our kids and grandkids are going to be repaying.
Okay, back to the kids now. Without indexation, the changes will scoop up more and more young people down the track. So, as you know, $3 million today will be worth much less in the future. So in your view, should that proposed $3 million cap be indexed?
Well, we're not proposing to index at the moment. If you want to do that in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 15 years' time, when it becomes a problem, if it becomes a problem, you can still do that. Don't forget, people will... they'll have plenty of notice if they decide not to save more than $3 million in their superannuation account, if they decide to invest in another investment property or do something else with their money. They'll be able to make those decisions too. They'll have plenty of time to decide how to structure their retirement savings in the future. But, there's nothing that prevents a future government indexing if they want to.
Is there a rift at the moment between Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers?
No. They're good friends.
Are they?
They're good friends, and they've got a terrific working relationship. Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Have you seen, are things testy behind the scenes?
No, not at all. No.
The Prime Minister...
I see them I saw them in Cabinet yesterday and the day before, working incredibly cooperatively. I saw Anthony thanking Jim for the hard work that he's done on this proposal. see a very, very good working relationship between the two of them. And I think it's a little bit, weird and funny that people come up with these stories.
Well, I don't know that that's weird and funny, because the Prime Minister had to mop him up yesterday. So are they on the same page?
Yeah, they absolutely are. And they're on the same page because what we're proposing is a small, modest, necessary change to start to deal with the $1 trillion of debt that the Liberals left for Australian taxpayers, because we don't want their kids and grandkids to be paying the interest bill on the spending spree that the Liberals and Nationals engaged in when they were in government.
Okay.
And don't forget, here's another thing that you have to think about, right? Peter Dutton says, I don't want to do this is a terrible way of paying down debt. Last time Peter Dutton was in government, when he was the health minister, he wanted to introduce a $6 co-payment through Medicare because he thought that was a good way of dealing with debt and reducing spending. What has Peter Dutton got in mind? If he says no, he's not going to do this, if he wins the election, he's going to reverse this, how will he pay down debt? He won't say before an election what he's going to do. Remember what Tony Abbott said? No cuts to health, no cuts to education, no cuts to the ABC and SBS, and no new taxes. That was what Tony Abbott said, and then they brought in the horror 2014 budget where they cut all of those things.
But onto your government,
why doesn't Peter Dutton answer how he intends to deal with debt?
Onto your government, though, and I have to wrap up here, but when there are differing messages that come from the two most senior members of government, or two of the most senior members, can the public have faith in what they're actually doing?
Yes, absolutely, because this is a well thought through, sensible, modest proposal.
Okay, Tanya Plibersek, we're out of time, but good to have you with us. And just finally, is Jim and Anthony, are they going to celebrate their birthday together today? Do you know?
Well, do you know, it's Jim's birthday, it's Anthony's birthday, it's also Brendan O'Connor's birthday.
Oh, so is everyone getting together?
Sadly, when you've got three members of cabinet, they don't always coincide in time for birthday cake and candles. But we were in a cabinet meeting yesterday together, and we wished them all a happy birthday yesterday.
Alrighty, Tanya Plibersek, good to chat. Talk to you soon.